the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, who has been in power in his country for nearly 2 decades, did not need a decisive military victory in the Nagorno-Karabakh region in order to establish the foundations of his rule. This is because he succeeded, through 4 successive presidential terms, in weakening his opponents and imposing absolute powers in the former Soviet Caucasus Republic. However, the strong leader who lived all his life in the robes of his father, Heydar Aliyev, the nationalist president who has the title of independence maker, was desperately needing to raise the banners of a great victory to enhance his image and achievements as a national hero, to be the first presidential decree issued after the Karabakh War. The last one is to set the 10th of November every year as a victory feast. This aura, which the younger Aliyev will enter the records of the country's history from its gate, constitutes an additional weapon to establish his presidential seat for life, regardless of the severity of the complications and conflicts in the surrounding space. In other words, the leader, whom some call the crowned king, no longer fears the repercussions of the colored revolutions that shook the chairs in neighboring countries and toppled many of his former colleagues. Who now dares to challenge the hero of the great victory? There is no doubt that the victory achieved by Azerbaijani forces in the autonomous Nagorno-Karabakh region over Armenian separatists is especially symbolic of the Azerbaijani president, whose family history has been linked to the chronic conflict with Armenia. Since his father, Heydar Aliyev, the first president of Azerbaijan after the declaration of independence at the end of the Soviet era, and a prominent former leader in the Soviet power, he was born in Nakhchivan, the Azerbaijani region located within the Armenian lands. Moreover, the Aliyev family themselves were from the village of Gamartli in the Zanjir region, which was later called Sizian. The region was at one point in history a part of Azerbaijan, but now it is a unique city in Armenia. Exciting upbringing and historical circumstances. Ilham Aliyev was born in 1961, and was brought up in the arms of Soviet power. His father was the head of the terrible intelligence apparatus known for short as the coup in Azerbaijan. Then he headed the republic as the first secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Azerbaijan SSR, before moving to Moscow, where he worked as Deputy Prime Minister, government, of the dissolved Soviet Union. So, it was not difficult for Ilham, who graduated from high school in 1977, to immediately enroll in the Institute of International Relations in Moscow, the prestigious institute of the Foreign Ministry, in which the most prominent figures of Russian diplomacy graduated, including the late Prime Minister Yevgeny Primakov and the current Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Later, Ilham Aliyev will remember that stage, telling a journalist, I was accepted on the basis of a testimony that officially states that in just 5 months I will be 16 years old. The first year of study was the most responsible. Studying in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, by the son of the first secretary of the Central Committee of the Azerbaijani Communist Party is one thing. And studying in Moscow is quite another, in a different environment, even at this young age. But I did not disappoint my father, as I studied well at the institute, and then succeeded in postgraduate studies. In 1985, after Ilham defended his thesis to obtain the degree of Candidate of Historical Sciences, he worked as a teacher at the same diplomatic institute, for a few years, after which he returned to Baku in 1991, when the Soviet Union was breathing its last. However, that period was very important, as it paved the way for the emergence of the star of the son of the Azerbaijani president in the Russian diplomatic circles, a stage that was followed by another no less important step, which paved the way for the building of close relations with Turkey for years later, Ilham Aliyev. This happened after Ilham Aliyev became involved in private business. Soon, he became president of the company, Orient, which specializes in the oil field. In 1992, he moved to Istanbul, where the main activity of the company was linked to Turkey. In the following year, Ilham returned to Azerbaijan after his father officially became president of the fledgling republic in the ruins of the former superpower. Since then, he has not been for a moment away from power in his country. So, from 1994 to 2003, he held the position of vice president, then first vice president of Sokar, state oil company of the Republic of Azerbaijan. This means that he practically participated in the implementation of Heydar Aliyev's oil strategy. During that period, in 1995 he was elected a parliamentarian, and he remained in his representative position with his work in the giant oil company, until he assumed the position of Prime Minister of the Republic of Azerbaijan in August 2003, a position in which he remained for only 2 months, on the recommendation of his father in preparation for his transfer to the chair seat. Aliyev Jr. won the votes of about 80% of the electorate, amid widespread skepticism on the part of international observers who spoke of numerous violations, and the Azerbaijani opposition did not acknowledge the results of the elections. The next day, more than 3,000 supporters of an opposition presidential candidate from the Musavat party moved along the central streets of the capital Baku, but the movement was quickly suppressed, and Aliyev appeared on national television to say, "I believe in a happy future for Azerbaijan. I am sure that our country will continue to develop and strengthen. Democracy in Azerbaijan will develop further, and political pluralism and freedom of expression will be guaranteed." our country will become a modern country. To achieve all this, a lot needs to be done in Azerbaijan. But in order to implement all this and turn Azerbaijan into a strong state, it is necessary, first of all, to continue Haydar Aliyev's policy in the country. These words he repeated many times. In an interview with the Russian government newspaper, he said, "Today Azerbaijan is Haydar Aliyev's business, and you can talk for hours about what he did for the country. And we must continue his career. I have always struggled and will strive to be like my father." These phrases reflected the essence of the problem facing the young president, who has accumulated practical experiences in oil companies, but he still lacks political experience, and he lacks the charisma that his father had. For years he lived on the political legacy of his father, the maker of independence and builder of modern Azerbaijan. So, there were expectations that he would not be able to adopt a strict leadership style. But it wasn't just his abilities and experiences. Ilham Aliyev was forced to rely entirely on the old ruling elite, and those who occupied influential positions during the father's era held all important ministerial posts. It took 2 years to prepare to change the governing body and form a team close to it. The coup against the old guard. In October 2005, Azerbaijan announced that a coup attempt had been thwarted, and 12 of the most prominent figures in the country were arrested, including the Minister of Economic Development, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Health and the former head of the country's Academy of Sciences. And some, according to reports, believed that Ilham Aliyev would not be able to rule the country. Even circles deemed him a transitional figure would ensure a successful transition to another member of the ruling elite. But it turns out that Ilham was a much smarter politician than those assumptions. He realized that the greatest threat to his rule did not come from the fragile opposition, but from the ruling elite. Haydar Aliyev's death resulted in the release of many influential elements in the old guard who agreed to transfer power to an inexperienced youth in order to continue controlling the decision-making keys in the country. The group was headed by the president's uncle, Jalil Aliyev, and his closest aide, Ali Insanov, who was the head of the Iraz clan, Azerbaijanis from Armenia, and founder of the ruling New Azerbaijan Party. However, against everyone's expectations, Ilham dealt roughly with his political opponents. Insanov and several members of the Aliyev family, who are holding important sites, were arrested on charges of being behind the coup attempt and were found guilty of corruption and embezzlement. The government cracked down on dissent after the November 2005 parliamentary elections. These measures helped, of course, erase the president's image as weak, although at the same time they blew up his image as a reformer. But what is important about the arrest of Insanov, the leader of Iraz, is that it heralded the symbolic end of clan rule. Although some Iraz personalities continued to hold most of the key positions, personal loyalty and closeness to the president became more important than belonging to one clan or another. And unlike his father, who relied primarily on his clan, Ilham tended to work with people who grew up in the capital, Baku, and often succeeded in business. Overall, the substantial revenues from oil exports contributed to the strengthening of the presidential power and the strengthening of the oligarchy's hegemony. Constitutional amendments, and a presidency for life. During the second presidential term, Ilham Aliyev held a referendum in the country to amend the constitution in 2009, at the initiative of the ruling New Azerbaijan Party. According to the results of the referendum, 90% of the voters voted in favor of the amendments. Among the amendments that were approved, the president was granted the right to run more than twice. This paved the way for inspiration to end the internal debate over his succession, although it was widely believed that the referendum was aimed at making it clear to competitors within the ruling elite that there is no need to fear a change of power in the near future. In any case, the opposition accused Aliyev of working to turn Azerbaijan into a monarchy, and the European Commission considered the referendum a dangerous step backward, and several international organizations described Azerbaijan as a country in which the president has concentrated broad power in his hands. The next constitutional referendum took place during the third presidential term in 2016. This time Ilham Aliyev himself asked citizens to vote to increase the presidential term from 5 to 7 years, and the positions of first vice president and vice presidents were created. Among the controversial changes were two other points affecting the activities of the legislative and executive branches. During the era of Haydar Aliyev, when Ilham was prime minister, he organized a referendum that transferred the powers of the head of state, in the event of his early departure, not to the Speaker of Parliament, but to the Prime Minister. This time, citizens were asked to pass a different amendment stating that if the President voluntarily resigned, his powers would not transfer to the Prime Minister, but to the first Vice President. All 29 amendments were approved in the 2016 referendum, with support levels ranging from 90 to 95% of the vote. Once again, the Council of Europe criticized this referendum, describing it as a new blow to the democratic development in the country. However, it soon became clear, 3 months after the approval of the new constitutional amendments, the goals of Ilham Aliyev. In February 2017, he issued a presidential decree appointing his wife Murabin to the position of first vice president. For your information, the First Lady since 2005 has been a deputy in Parliament, but with the constitutional amendments, she has become with very broad authority, and has more than a potential candidate for the presidency in the event of any emergency for the president. Naturally, this appointment